Hello and welcome to the Metapod Trading Card Game Podcast, the Pokémon TCG podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. I'm Jake. This is my co-host Sean. Sean, how are you doing? It's been a week since we've seen more than a week.
It's been a week for an extra week for the viewers and listeners.
But yeah, how are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah. I went to Yellowstone, so I got to see far fewer animals than I was anticipating. But I think it's because it's like late in the season, so but it was gorgeous.
Everybody's getting ready for hibernation, including myself.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I'm good. I'm good though. It's back in Vancouver at the moment. So how about you?
I've been super busy lately. Work is still busy, as it always is. But I've been doing a lot of things outside of other card games. I've been really testing the waters everywhere on card games. I ran and streamed a store regional for One Piece. That was pretty exciting. I have gotten into Union Arena, which is a brand new game that's come out, just because Bleach is it's basically like a Weiss Schwartz for anyone who doesn't know. They just like license IPs, and an expansion is like a different IP in the game. You can only play within your IP. So it's honestly a pretty like cost-effective card game.
Yeah, if you really like,
you only have to.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you really like one IP, they'll just make cards for that IP, and like you said, like that's your whole set. That's all you can work with. So.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be like a year or a year and a half before you see a second expansion of that IP. So definitely, and it's a fun game. But also, I got invited to the Gundam TCG. I don't even know like what kind of event to call it, but there's some sort of exclusive event happening. The mission directive, intel on the launch of the Gundam card game from Bandai. So got an official invite for that, which was really, really cool.
That's awesome. That is dope. So, I mean, just for the Metapod viewers and listeners, if you're for whatever reason not aware, where would they find all of this amazing content? Give yourself a self plug here for all this other stuff.
I've had so many channels over the days, I feel like, but now this channel, this is definitely like a main channel at this stage of my life. It's called Atrocious TCG. So keeping it pretty simple for you all to find it. Atrocious TCG. It's basic. I mean, it's pretty much a One Piece channel, One Piece card game, but I plan on doing other card games, which is why it's called TCG in general.
You didn't, fit yourself into this mold that you can never get out of, which is good.
No, it's basically whatever card games I'm obsessed with. But no matter what, the Metapod not going away anytime soon. If it's going away, it's because Sean doesn't want to do it anymore.
Dang, put me on the spot. Well,
exactly.
Speaking of Pokemon, though, we do have some news to cover that came out over the last couple of weeks. Some of you may be aware of this already, but we'll cover it anyways. And then we're going to dive deep into the Louisville Regionals, which just wrapped up this past weekend with some, I will say, a very healthy metagame as a preview, I would argue.
Well, healthy, I don't know, healthy, but diverse.
Okay,
we'll call it diverse metagame.
I like that. That's a more nuanced response, Jake. Maybe that'll lead into your thoughts.
I think it's a diverse metagame.
Okay, fair.
Continue.
That's really what we're going to get into today. So just to give us as much time as possible for Louisville, for the most recent stuff, let's jump into the news. Starting with the fact that Pokemon, Jake, is now getting into the game of mystery boxes. I don't know if this...
We officially have mystery boxes in the Pokemon Center website, which packs, did we already with booster packs? That's a whole different conversation.
I mean, I guess booster packs are kind of mystery boxes. It's true. You're right. But yeah, I mean, like you might be familiar with your favorite Pokemon or whatever TCG creators out there doing their own mystery boxes or promoting mystery boxes from other companies. Oftentimes these can carry very wide ranging price tags, like $20 mystery box all the way up to like, you'll see, I remember there was a window of time when like Unlisted Leaf and Leon Hart and all those were doing like these oh, my $2,000 mystery box unboxing, and like,
Yeah.
you get like vintage product and stuff like that, and slabbed cards and yada yada. But the Pokemon Center one is a little bit more straightforward. What should people be expecting from the Pokemon Center?
According to PokeBeach.com, you can get these special delivery boxes for about $50 USD. And if you're watching on the video version of the podcast, these are a lot of different products that you'll see. It comes with 10 randomly inserted items, right? So 10 random, some maybe super valuable, but maybe some not valuable. But you do know that you get a figure, 2 plushes, a 3-pack pin set, a hat, a set of 65 card sleeves, and 4 booster packs. Or wait,
Yep.
10 randomly, you won't know which item you'll receive. Oh, so it's saying like there's a variety in
Yeah.
each category, right? If you see on the pictures, there's a whole bunch of plushes ranging from Charizard to Tatsugiri to Tepig, a ton of hats that have a bunch of different Pokemon designs on them, sleeves that I don't think I've ever seen a lot of these sleeves before, and I definitely need to grab the Porygon sleeves that they have from secondhand because I love the Porygon sleeves in there. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's really weird because it feels slightly out of place, I feel like, for the Pokemon Company. And I have not looked through like the website or anything like that. Does this feel like leftover items that they've got just sitting in the back and they're like, you know what, we can clump all of these together and just send them randomly in this? Because I feel like, especially the figures, right? The figures
Yeah.
are the big thing for me. I feel like I've seen some of these figures before, like that Skitty.
You might have. I don't know. I can't personally remember, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Hmm.
Like, I'm with you. I can't imagine they have, printed, commissioned, whatever you want to call it, like all of these items special for this mystery box. Like the
Hmm.
pins, I know, explicitly. I've seen some of these pins before, in various products or just being sold on the Pokemon Center website directly.
And
So,
even like the hats, like one of the hat is a Gigantamax Pokemon.
yeah.
And it's like, wait, are we doing Gigantamaxes again? Like I thought we were in Terras now. Like if this was current, you would think that it's a Terra hat.
Yeah, yeah. So the reality is that a lot of this stuff may be overstock, and
Hmm.
that if you had bought it separately, it maybe would cost more. Whatever you open your mystery box, you'll probably be like, oh, well, retail for all of this might have been like, I don't know, $10, $20 more, but you're getting a deal. And like, just be frank though, like none of this stuff is like bad. So it's not
No.
like you are getting bad product. You're just getting product that like has probably sat in a distributor or in a warehouse somewhere for a little longer than they're comfortable with. And they just need to move old product. So, and I think this is a pretty interesting way of doing it. I think that anybody who is worried, like, oh, Pokemon's getting into the mystery box game, blah, 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 like, it's a weird frame of reference,
Hmm.
but nothing about this screams like, oh, you could maybe open up a jackpot or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I think this is like a very cute little gift. Jake, I would actually be interested to see if this sells fairly well. I'm surprised that Pokemon doesn't offer, and maybe they do, and I just am not part of the mailing list. I wonder if Pokemon offers a monthly subscription box.
I don't think that they do. I know that there's like a monthly, or there used to be on Pokemon Trading Card Game Online. You could get in like a newsletter, and then like every newsletter would have like a online code for a pack that
Hmm.
you could redeem in the client. I don't know if they still do that, but I know that that's something. But I don't think there's a monthly subscription of things. I could be wrong about that, but like I think that this is great, especially with the holidays coming up.
Yes, I think they're launching it at the right time. You have the holidays; it's an
Yeah.
easy gift. Like, oh, I know somebody that likes Pokemon. I have no clue anything more about them than that, right? Like, I know that they
Hmm.
like Pokemon. Let's just get them an assortment of objects, and for $50, it's a pretty easy gifting price too. for like,
And especially
close
like
friends or family.
yeah, and especially like if you got multiple kids, like
Yeah.
younger kids, this could be like you buy this and then you just open it yourself and separate the items in the stocking stuffers,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, Jimmy gets the plush and Taryn gets the hat and Oliver gets the sleeves,
Yep.
like it's I like this product, and you get 4 booster packs on top of it. So
Yeah. I
we
mean, hey,
love
look,
booster packs.
maybe you'll pull, the Radiant, not the SIR Greninja EX, and you could sell it and buy 6 more of these. And that's your
Maybe
stonks.
they also show, at least in the product image that PokeBeach has, that you can get a Sun and Moon pack. And I don't know if that's like Sun and Moon base set or if that's just Sun and Moon era, but like I
Bruh.
can't wait to see all the YouTubers posting about how they tried to get Cosmic Eclipse packs or Burning Shadows packs to pull the gold fairy energy or whatever the
I
Charizard.
Jake, in an alternate timeline, we'd still have XY evolutions packs in this.
Oh my gosh. XY, I saw a side topic because we're all about side topics. Guess the price on a XY Evolutions booster box at one of my local card shops, which is right at market value, by the way. So
I'm
it's
gonna
not
guess.
unreasonable.
I feel like I'm gonna guess $1,100.
Oh no, you
Maybe
went
maybe
higher than I thought you
800.
would.
Maybe 800.
It's 850.
Okay. I was trying to
But
go a little higher, but I was like,
But holy smokes, because I remember opening multiple boxes in one day because it was a rainy day when I was trying to keep a sealed collection and I missed out on about $1,500. But, anyways, we're going to keep going in this because we don't have all day or night, whatever you plan on listening to. If you're a big fan of Pokemon promos and kind of exclusive event promos, this is a really cool one for me. The sports world and the Pokemon TCG world collided recently. TPCI released an exclusive Pikachu promo and merchandise during the LA Clippers and Portland Trailblazers basketball game. It was part of the annual Rain City Showcase match. And so they promoted a whole bunch of products. Like Sean's kind of showing on screen. There's a card with a Rain City, Rain City Showcase stamp. It's an old Pikachu from Paldea Evolved. They've used this in a couple different promos, I think, at this point, but obviously a new stamp on this one. And the Pikachu actually came in the Terra Charizard sleeve. So not only did they just give you the card in the usual paper foiling, like when you go to GameStop or Best Buy to get those promos, this came in an actual sleeve, like an actual Pokemon design sleeve, which I thought was really, really cool. And there was a whole bunch of other merchandise like hats, pins, stickers, things of that nature. So if you're a collector of promos, right? I know a ton of people that love collecting stuff. This is a really cool one to have.
yeah. I mean, like, look, like you said, if you're a promo card collector, this is a very niche one to get.
Mm-hmm.
The pin is pretty cool too. I know a lot of people also collect pins, and I think this will be a pretty obscure pin to have in like 3 or 4 years' time because it's gonna be like, wait, where is this pin from? Rain City Showcase.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say, I had no idea that this was happening until after the event, like PokeBeach is posting about it and stuff. So unfortunate because, living on the West Coast, maybe I could have, gotten something if I wanted to take the day driving, but I'll have to settle some other way.
yeah. Last bit of news though, and this is a big one, Jake. Prismatic Evolutions is a set that we will be getting in January. It is going to be a special set. So think 151, think Shrouded
Mm-hmm.
Fable, think, Crown Zenith. I think Crown Zenith is probably the best comparison in terms of like what the set is going to be like, because that was also a specialty set we got at the very beginning of the year. Was it 2 years ago or something, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
So that is going to be coming to us, releasing on the 17th of January. Now the question then is, okay, we got a special set, right? What's going to be selling the set, Jake? What's going to be getting people to shell out?
It's gonna be Evolution. So the set name implies the EV evolutions going on. If you remember EV Heroes, I believe the set was called in Japan, and what was the English set
Evolving
called? It was the
Skies.
Evolving Skies. Yes, it's going to be that kind of hype, right? It's going to be that kind of fun. So it's going to feature those Pokemon, and we don't know a ton of other stuff. We just have like expectations of what is going to be inside of it. Like a lot of the starter decks that are in Japan that are releasing in November. But probably just like most other holiday sets that we have in this, you're not going to be able to purchase individual booster packs, right? No booster boxes. Just like the other holiday sets, they're going to be in these premium collection boxes, binder boxes, ETBs, right? Maybe buffed up Pokemon Center ETBs as well. And just kind of like that. So if you're looking for some fun holiday additions and maybe some evolutions, if you love evolutions, don't worry, you're getting your fill soon.
Yeah, in terms of specialty sets too, I don't know what it is, but I feel like Pokemon the last year maybe, and maybe I'm missing something, but like I feel like the last year they've kind of whiffed on the specialty sets from a collector's perspective.
Uh,
The reason being,
yes and no.
I feel like Shrouded Fable was like
That was
kind of.
definitely a whiff.
I think that was a bit of a whiff. I can't remember what we had, if we had anything at the beginning of this year, but
Wasn't it Mew 150? Oh no, it wasn't Mew 151 because
that was
that
last
was
year
right before I moved.
fall.
Yeah, that was last fall. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
about a year ago. I remember it was right before I moved to Vegas.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly what came out when, but like we've had some what I would call specialty set stinkers in the past. And I think
Hmm.
Shrouded Fable, as much as I think the art in Shrouded Fable, some of it is amazing, I think it doesn't have a lot of collectability. And I think it will fall into this camp of like a little bit of Crown Zenith, maybe a better than Champion's Path type thing. But I think with how successful Evolving Skies was, Prismatic Evolutions, I'm not saying, people should go out, buy it all up from the shelves because it's going to be sold out. I don't think that's happening at all. Pokemon is printing more cards than you know what to do with these days.
Hmm.
But I do think this is going to be one of those sets that people, I really think this is probably going to be a set that really hits with collectors too. Just because
The
evolutions.
Yeah, I mean Evolutions always sells well. The January holiday set, Sean, Paldean Fates.
See, that tells you just how,
The
how
third the
memorable.
third straight or not the third straight, the third iteration of what was Hidden Fates.
Yeah. So you got Hidden Fates, Shining Fates, Paldean Fates, and Paldean
Yeah.
Fates definitely the
And
third
I
part of
think
a trilogy that did not.
and I think I talked about this and we had a discussion on the podcast of like Paldean Fates, and it was just like, okay, this is the third go around that we've had of this. It's not hitting anymore. Like it's the same thing. There's baby Pokemon, there's shiny big Pokemon. Also, the shiny big Pokemon, like the V's and the EXs and stuff that they had in Paldean Fates, were not great in my opinion.
I would say wouldn't the
Not a
biggest hit was really the Mew EX, the shiny Mew EX, which is a
Yeah, it was
gorgeous
just.
card.
Mhm.
But
But
you
that was
know,
like pretty much it. It was like that and Toad Squirrel EX. So
yeah,
you know, for
yeah,
take that for what you will. So hopefully that this new one Prismatic Evolution brings kind of a revitalization for a lot of us with these holiday sets, and especially me. But
yep,
it's going to be interesting, especially once we start seeing some of these cards, because if you know the Evolving Skies evolutions, like the Moon Umbreon, has been going crazy in price these days.
yeah.
So it'll be curious to see how this also reacts to it from a secondary market standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen. I don't know if they've released the special. I don't think the special arts have been revealed from Terastal Festival, the one that the
Mm-mm.
set in Japan that we'll be pulling those cards from. But
Yeah, I
I,
mean that releases in Japan on December 6th. So
yeah, I think it'll all. I really think it'll depend on how the art for the evolution like illustration rare styles, if they even
Yeah.
exist. Because I do think if you go with the typical, terastallized Pokemon look, you know how like the art on some of those cards have been. It's kind of, I think it's very polarizing. Some people maybe dig it, but I don't think it's really that collectible. And only when you get into things like the Greninja SIR, that is also a terrestrialized Pokemon. That's, I think, one of the examples of maybe art that has resonated really well. So,
Hmm.
and look, Evolving Skies, the art on the evolutions is really good for those illustration rares, for those
It's
alternate
just
arts.
crazy. It's just crazy to me the difference as well, since we're on this conversation of like the SIRs of the Charizard EX versus the Greninja, right? Two of the most popular Pokemon
Yeah.
of all time, right? Like some of the most popular in general, but the difference between the two illustration rares is like over $200.
It's
The Charizard you
wild.
can get for like $40, and the Charizard is a playable deck.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a really good deck.
I mean, I guess it's just for whatever reason, that art, as gorgeous as I think it is too, that art is just not, you know, it may be that there was a window of time when it was easier to pull certain high rarity cards for like about a year. Pokemon was really dialing in on how difficult they want these cards to pull to be.
Hmm.
And the Greninja is sort of at the end of that, lever turning. So I do think it's much harder to pull the Greninja. I will grant
Yeah.
them that. But yeah, it is, but you still think, oh, there'd be a Charizard tax, right? It doesn't matter how hard it is to pull. Everyone wants to collect all the Charizards, and
And it's the most playable Charizard ever, too. That's also what blows my mind.
yeah, it is a wildly play. I mean, Reshiram, not no Reshiram, but yeah, Reshiram, Reshizard. I mean, that was a very playable card too. Reshizard was
Hmm.
very playable, so
Yeah.
it's pretty good. But anyways, that is all the news that is fit to print. But we still have Louisville to talk about. So switching gears now, going into the Louisville Regional Championships. Um, on the video, we're showing Limitless right now, but we're going to go into all the major deck lists. But Jake, before we get too deep into it, just looking at this top 8, you made a point that I said it was a very healthy format, and you were like, I would say diverse, which, to break it down for everybody listening, diverse is a very apt word, because if you look at the top 8, only one deck type, archetype, is repeated, and that is Lugia. There are 2 Lugias in the top 8, piloted by Kiaran and then Yerko Valencia. I hope,
Yerko, yeah.
yeah. But otherwise, we have a Terapagos list, a Regidrago list, a Charizard list, a Palkia list, a Lost Zone list, and then sitting at the top with Caleb Gedimer, a Raging Bolt list. So, very diverse. But Jake, quickly, your thoughts seeing this top 8, like what? Yeah, just give me some more insight into that comment.
I think that Lost Box really surprised a lot of people. Before I get too deep into the comment, I think Lost Box was the surprise of the tournament.
Yep.
We saw people, I think Hunter Butler was playing Lost Box as well and did pretty well with it, showcased it on stream. And it was very interesting to see like how this archetype that a lot of people thought, especially once Dragapult came, or I'm sorry, Dragapult and Regidrago came about, was like, oh, this deck is on the back burner right now. But if you look at a lot of these different archetypes in here, right, you have a lot of different common themes. There's a couple like Briars up here in this. There's a couple Dusknors as
Yeah.
well in this in the
A lot of
top
Dusknoir.
tables. Yeah, a couple Dusknors in, I believe, the third place list, the fourth place list, the seventh place list, and that doesn't even include like the rest of the field, right? Even the rest of day 2. I will say in that. And even ninth place was Palkia Dusknor as well, just to give you a little bit of insight. on that. So it's just like a weird format. And then Reggie Drago as well, I feel like is extremely good and extremely aggressive at times. We saw different people. I think Lucas Zhang. How do you
Lucas
pronounce
Shing?
this? Never mind.
I don't know.
It's Shing.
Maybe.
Um, was piloting Reggie Drago and was doing pretty well with it, especially after day one. And so it's like, I don't know. There's something about this format, in my opinion, that doesn't feel good. Um, it just feels way too aggressive. Like I don't feel like there's a ton of comeback potential, and
Hmm.
especially with, I'm not going to sit here and say that Dusknoir is banned or should be banned or Briar should be banned or whatever, but it feels really strong, and who knows, maybe I'm just not playing the format enough. Maybe I'm just not trying different things or whatever. But just watching the game, some of the games are like, some of the games are really good, I will admit. Like watching Piper Lapine pilot the Gardevoir Bennett deck was really, really cool. I think not just because it was item locked, but just because it was cool to see her like eventually, looping Bennett's in a sense with the Monkey Dory effects. Because if you know the Metapod, I love Monkey Dory. And some other different stuff. Like we saw Haruki Miwa with Charizard Pidgeot play a really interesting list, played a 2-1-2 Dusknoir line, first off, and a Mist Energy in there,
Hmm.
which Mist Energy, not something that you see a lot of times in the deck. So, but it ended up doing well in this tournament because it's very good against stuff like Reggie Drago. So, for
Yeah.
Reggie Drago being so strong and also being so popular as of late, right? Really just falling off and going into the backseat. I posted in the official Metapod Discord as I tried to frantically pull it up. The deck day one analysis, including like Raging Bull at 14%, Terapagos Dusknoir at 10.5, Dragapult EX was very popular, 9.5%, but was pretty much nowhere in the top tables, especially top 32, except for like Jesse Spencer in the
Hmm.
top 24. Um, so just curious again, like to kind of see all that, and very interesting as well to see the top eight be so diverse in a sense, which is the first step I think you need.
Yeah, I mean, I guess speaking of aggressive, let's dive into Caleb's list and we can keep talking about
Mm-hmm.
that. So it's an interesting point because I think that sometimes there are certain decks that can drive a format, right? Like a deck that if you don't have a clear counter to it, the whole format kind of warps around this deck and the speed of the deck or the popularity or the play style, whatever. And I think that right now that deck is Raging Bolt.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not a knock on Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt is a good deck. It's a popular deck. I don't think it is overly popular. Like we looked at the numbers. It's not like it's like a 20-30% meta share. It is just popular. But the deck itself, when you look at it, you got 4 Bolts, 3 Ogerpon, Squawk, Pheasantipity, Luminion, Radiant Greninja. All of those cards are, Raging Bolt hits really hard, first off. So that's really your lead, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to be able to do, on one turn, in theory, I can output 280 plus damage pretty easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
I Professor Sada, 2 energy, attach return, and if I get even 2 Ogerpon attachments, all of a sudden I'm hitting 350, and that's starting from 0 energy, which is, it's crazy to
And
think
it's not
it's
an unreasonable thing when you have stuff like Earthen Vessel, energy retrievals, right,
yep.
in these kinds of lists. So, and you already talked about Professor Sada not only attaching the energies,
But
but
drawing.
drawing energies as well.
Yeah, and it just feels like between the how hard it hits, how much it draws, like Ogerpon drawing and attaching energy all with one ability. You have Squawk to get your early game, and then okay, so you've got a really big beat stick in Raging Bolt that does a ton of damage, you have to answer it. Well, guess what? When you answer that Pokemon, I'm going to draw 3 extra cards with Pheasantipity. And
That's another card that I should have mentioned in like, wow, a lot of these decks are playing that
right.
card. Pheasantipity is almost in every list, it feels like right now.
And, it's a weird one. Like, I think that it's not like we haven't had ubiquitous cards in the past. Think back to Tapu Lele, Dedenne, Crobat. Like, there have been staple cards for a long time. I will say, however, especially like I look at this list and right in the middle at the top, it's fine to have staple supporters and staple Pokemon like search. Like that's whatever. Nobody's going to complain about Nest Balls and Ultra Balls. But when your Pokemon line for a lot of decks is going to include one copy of Squawk, one copy of Fez, one copy of Radiant Greninja, maybe a copy of Lumineon or Rotom, and you just start to see like every deck sort of morphing into this package of both Pokemon and trainers that are like 60% the same, it feels. And then on the other side, if you're not going hyper aggro like this, you're going aggro with Dusknoir in order to actually output the same amount of damage. And now you have like Palkia running Dusknoir, Charizard running Dusknoir, Terapagos running Dusknoir. And you're like, oh my gosh, it just feels like every match is almost the same. Like they're like weird mirrors, except you picked a different starter. Like you went to Professor Oak, you all got slightly different starters, but the rest of your 6 Pokemon lineup is the same.
Hmm.
And that's my gut read as like I think things like Raging Bolt are pushing the format because they are so hyper aggressive and hyper consistent. It can maybe that is causing an issue, but I've diatribed a bit long.
Well, I don't even know if issue is the correct terminology for it, right? Because like we can look at like the support Pokemon line, right? That you were talking about, like Squawk, Fez. Do you remember the last set of Pokemon that we saw support Pokemon in every single deck?
I mean, was it? Go ahead.
Dedenne and Crobat. You remember when those two cards both existed at the exact same time?
Oh yeah, it was wild.
Dedenne GX and Crobat. Yeah, so it's like it's one of those things too that like yeah, I can say that like the format doesn't feel the most fun to me. But looking at other formats, like I need to take a deeper dive going into other formats to be like, okay, do I really feel this way? Like how different is it than in the past? Stuff like that. Cause like even in what am I trying to say? Previous formats, right? With big beat stick deck. We've seen big beat stick decks in stuff like Blacephalon. Blacephalon is almost the same deck as this, it feels like, when it had Welder and it had those Naganadals that were getting energies back, and just absolutely blowing stuff up. Now, energy got put in the lost zone, so your resources were definitely more finite than it is in this Raging Bolt Ogerpon deck. But it's kind of like that thing. So just trying to think, maybe the Baby Blounds one is even better of a thing, because you had to have the energies in hand, I believe, right? And you discarded them
Yeah,
from hand.
you did.
I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, like there are some comparisons. I'm trying to. It is hard for me to remember a deck archetype that felt quite like this from the past. I'm sure better historians of the game would know, but I mean,
I
look,
feel like Blacephalon GX is probably like a pretty good
yeah,
comparison.
it's a pretty good
Casada and
comparison.
Welder are kind of the same in a sense, right? Accelerating energies in the drawing cards, and
I
big
would also
Pokemon that just
say,
blow things up.
this is better than those in that
No,
Naganadel was a
it
stage
is.
one,
Yes.
and Teal Mask Ogrepon is a basic.
No, yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
It is better, but I don't know. I mean, Ogerpon was 2 prizes and My Little Naganadel was 1, but also Blacephalon got to take a free prize. You played a 5 prize game
Yeah.
in a sense. at times. I don't know. There's pros and cons to both of them, and can you really compare them because they're two different formats and they're two different archetypes? Who knows? But um, yeah, I think as much as mostly me, all me, as much as I complain, potentially, it's definitely not as bad as ADP. I will say
No,
that.
yeah, I
That
look.
is that is my least favorite deck of all time.
Yeah, there have definitely been worse formats for
Yeah.
sure. This is not a bad format, I don't think, but I would say that I think it was an apt point that like diverse and healthy are not the same word, and I think if you actually dive into a lot of these lists, you will find a lot more similarities than you may expect or may find differences.
Hmm.
And the decks that truly are distinct and different are things like I think Lost Zone Box is a very different deck, obviously.
Yeah.
Lugia is a very different deck, and then Reggie Drago, I would say, is probably fairly different as well, right? Like your attack style is completely, but I mean, you're still running the Ogre Pawn. But
Yeah, I mean, but it
yeah,
kind of fits because it's grass, and you need grass.
but I mean, speaking of a different way to approach this format, Lost Box. So,
Hmm.
as you alluded to, taking, being the surprise deck, I think, in the top eight, especially, watching the finals match, it was interesting to see that when Lost Box runs appropriately, it seems like it had a good matchup at the finals. But
Hmm.
the reality of the games were that Lost Box won the first game and then absolutely brick city the second two. I don't know. Did you get a chance to watch the finals, Jake?
I have not gotten a chance to watch the finals. I've just only seen Hunter Butler's round that was
Okay.
streamed through Lost Box. So I have some familiarity of like how the deck functions, how it runs, some like matchup stuff, but I haven't watched the actual finals.
Well, yeah, the first game, it felt like Caleb had like no shot, right? Like the prize map was just all off for Caleb, and
Hmm.
especially because look, Blood Moon Ursaluna in this deck is MVP. Like maybe people who play this deck all the time will think differently, but in this format, especially if you're playing against Raging Bolt, Blood Moon hitting for 240, if you can Lost
Is a
Vacuum,
perfect number.
yeah, if you can Lost Vacuum those Bravery Charms away, you're just taking a knockout. And between the fact that it comes down and hits for free in the late game, and the fact you have Mirage Gate to have it hit, in the mid game
At
even,
any point. Yeah.
right? Like I remember early on, I think Michael loaded up like 3 energy onto an Ursaluna just to attack like halfway through the game, and then the next turn just hit again, and that was the game. Uh, yeah, so really strong set of cards here, but the downside for the Lost Box player is you're so reliant on Colress. And in game three, I think he went through half of his deck and he never played in a Colress at all that whole game,
Hmm.
which was wild in game three. It's like I was watching this going like, where are your Colress at? So
It's definitely a cool one, and it's my favorite deck of the format right now. I will say I've always liked Lost Box decks.
yeah,
Whether it's Kyogre, Celebrations, Kyogre, one of my favorite cards. Love that guy. Or Gudra, even. Played a little bit of Lost Box Gudra. Now, this new iteration from Michael, very, very cool.
and yeah, I mean, look, I think if you are a fan of single prize decks, there's not really another good option out there outside of Snorlax Stall, like Snorlax Blocklax, so to speak. So if that's not your cup of tea, then really Lost Box is probably your only big option. Barring some, I did encounter over the week though an Aegislash deck.
Oh,
Which do you know what Aegislash does?
I am slightly aware of it, but
It's
remind
Mimikyu.
everybody else.
It's Mimikyu.
Oh, it's Mimikyu.
It's just Mimikyu, and it hits for
That's tough.
120. Yeah, it's so like actually in some aspects in this format, it's pretty rough. But
Hmm.
just throw that out there. But Jake, what's another deck on this list you want to take a look at?
I do want to look at the Palkia Dusknoir because I know that's a deck, especially I think it was Stefan Ivanov that was playing it. He was kind of the first person that I saw play this at a major tournament. I know some people have played around with this idea, but I think he kind of mainly popularizing it, at least from what I've noticed. Plays a heavy Dusknor line, right? 3 Duskull, 1 Dusclops, 2 Dusknor, and plays Palkia V and Palkia V Star. Palkia V Star, especially with a lot of people playing Terrestrialization Zone or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Palkia can hit some pretty good numbers, and even without that stadium, that extra bench space, it's just like we've said with Palkia, Raikou, all of these different more Pokemon on the field, more damage types of stuff. The format is filled bench
Yep.
sitters. I feel like just about every single deck fills the bench to some extent. So Palkia hitting great numbers, and then your typical support Pokemon that you see in here, Squawkability, Pheasantipity, Rotom V being opted in this deck, and a 1/0/1 line of Greninja EX, that card that you were talking about earlier, Sean, that fighting type Terra Pokemon. Greninja EX actually is really cool in the deck, I think. Seeing people like Azul and stuff even play it as well on stream, Tricky Jim played on stream. That's a pretty neat inclusion in the deck.
Yeah, I mean, look, you do 170. Let's
Mm-hmm.
see, you search your deck for any card, put it into your hand. So 170 is a pretty decent number. You can either set up a knockout on the following turn. You could combo it. I'm not sure this happens very often, but with Radiant Greninja for 90, set up some damage there and then take a knockout. But just doing 170, whether or not you're taking a knockout, and then just being able to get any card out of your deck to set up, maybe a Dusknoir play on the following turn. So you do 170, and then you Dusknoir to take the prizes, knock something else out, end up with a 4 prize turn, right? Pretty big swing.
And even that with Mirage Barrage, I think is what it's called.
Yep.
Being able to spread out damage for some of these other decks, right? Because we've talked about, Charizard being at these top tables. Terapagos, we'll talk about it a little bit. Having the Noctowls, Duskulls, all over the field in a lot of decks. There's a lot of little babies in the format. And guess what? Not too many Manaphy's
No.
in decks that we'll see. So Mirage Barrage, can be a very, very dangerous move, especially with Star Portal, right? Palkia V
Yep.
Star's attack, to be able to use that attack and take out a whole bunch of Pokemon for a multi-prize turn.
Yep. And then obviously you got Blood Moon or Saluna just chilling,
Oh yeah,
as a
just a
free
great
attacker
card,
late game.
especially. And I think honestly, like we talk about Dusknor, right, and the Dusknor package, I honestly think Blood Moon Ursaluna should be like it's in the Dusknor package. Like if you're playing Duskull, Dusclops, Dusknor, you need to play a Blood Moon Ursaluna because manipulating the amount of energy you need for that attack is so good sometimes.
Yeah, and look, the 240 is a great number, but sometimes you're facing off against a Palkia or something bigger, and that
Mm-hmm.
13 damage or maybe even just 5 damage from Dusclops is really all you need to make the difference. So,
Yeah,
um,
I mean, think about a Dusclops in combination with Blood Moon Ursaluna. That's 290 damage, and then Dusknor is
yeah, 370.
370.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you can knock out anything in the format, and also flows. You would think that it doesn't flow very well with Palkia, right? Knocking out one of your own Pokemon for the damage, but it
Mhm.
actually does fit Palkia pretty well. You hit some pretty interesting numbers.
I will say too, this is important in this deck because you might notice too, there's not a lot of switching cards in the deck. So you have
Hmm.
Prime Catcher and one switch, and that's it. Outside of that, though, look, you have a free Retreater and Mew, but for the most part, your energy is very precious in this deck. So being able to promote your Duskulls, Dusklops, and Dusknoirs to the active between turns, and then saying, "Hey, I know I'm going to blow this up. I'm not going to need to worry about pivot," is really, really impactful. So. And then I will say, watching the semifinals match where Palkia was played, it was just so cool seeing a deck utilize Night Stretcher as well as this
Yeah.
deck does. Because you could just see there'd be turns, and it was like, okay, maybe I really need a Palkia V Star, or I really need the Dusklops or the Dusk Noir, and I found the rare candy, and then all the time you'd be like, oh, well, I have access to this and I have access to that, and it turned the discard kind of into an additional deck that you had access to, which I think was really cool.
And I think really maximizes the power of something like Squawkabilly, right?
Yeah.
Squawkabilly, being able to just trash basically whatever you want, to be able to draw a new set on your first turn. You know, if you've got Palkia V-Stars in there, you got the little baby Froakie or something. You know, it's like you said, you know, setting up as almost like a second deck, especially when you play Pokestops in this deck, right? You be able to get your items pretty easily, and you get a Night Stretcher off Pokestop. It's basically like getting a Pokemon off Pokestop or an energy, right? It's your actual, besides Star Portal, it's the only way to get back energy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really huge in this deck. And the last thing I'd say about the deck is that I think Iono is a wildly useful. I mean, it's not a surprise, but like just watching some of the matches and seeing some of those hyper aggressive decks that do require a bit of a combo each turn in order to pull off what they're doing. I think Iono is way more impactful in this format than maybe they're giving it credit, but I don't know. I think it's a wildly impactful card in the format.
Yeah, I think especially with Dusknoir running around, Iono's really, really good because you can really punish your opponents for utilizing Dusknoir to like KO your Pokemon in a sense.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a more set up field than they do.
Yeah. I will say though, the key is to use it wisely because a lot of people are using Pheasantipity. So, you're going to have to be aware of the fact that, yes, you can Iono them down to 1, but if you don't take care of that Pheasantipity, it may not matter. Or
yeah, they'll have a starting hand of 5 cards, 1 for turn and 3 off Fez.
Exactly. So, and maybe Jake, that is some of the frustration that, you and to some degree I see is it does feel like in not having enough potential to come back, cards like Iono are just far less impactful with things like Luminion and Pheasantipity in the format that are just like ask so little of you other than a bench space.
Yeah, I think Pheasantipity is a very interesting card to be printed, especially because it's an iteration of Oricorio GX, which was not as impactful at all. I think in this, maybe because everybody was playing Dedenes and stuff, so Pheasantipity didn't matter as much. But now, since Pheasantipity is restricted in Squawkabilly to once on your first turn only, maybe that just adds Pheasantipity's value way, way more.
No, that's true. I mean, we had the discussion a while back about how people were discussing, is Radiant Greninja the best Pokemon card ever printed? Because think of the amount of card draw that it gives you over the course of a game. I'll be interested to see if Pheasantipity has any of that same consideration. Maybe not. I'm trying to think about it because I'm like, Dedenne as a pure draw engine is technically stronger on your turn because you are, you have a lot more cards that you see on any given turn that can lead into bigger plays, maybe. And then with Pheasantipity, you only get to draw after your opponent has taken a knockout. If everything's a 2-prizer, then in theory, you only get to draw with Pheasantipity twice. They take 2 prizes, you draw 3. They take 2, you draw 3. You're not going to get another take 2 prizes. The game's over. So they both are basically drawing you 3. But in some ways, I think Pheasantipity is a little bit more insidious from a game design perspective because it does make putting your opponent at a bad hand size to come back almost impossible.
Yeah, and it's like you put the 2-prizer in play, but a lot of these decks already play a 2-prizer, right? So it's not like that big of a deal, right? If you already have a Squawkabilly on field, a Rotom on field, all right, with less HP, Mew EX in this deck, and just continuously being able to draw. But Palkia in general, very cool deck. I also really enjoyed seeing this deck do well over the last couple weeks in these different tournaments.
I do think that was one of our picks. I think my pick was I think somebody will break Palkia. And look, it didn't win the tournament, but I small pat on the back. It wasn't Palkia with Terapagos, but it was Palkia.
Yeah.
So
I would say it still did well. I'll give you a little bit. I'll give you the win. I don't even know what I picked, to be honest.
Do you want to take a quick look at the newest deck in format, though, Terapagos, and see how it has turned out now that we have a
Hmm.
top 8 result?
So Terapagos, I feel like what most everybody is going to is without the Bouffalants, right? Bouffallant also came in the set, 2 Bouffalants on the field. I think it was like 60 less damage to your basic normal type Pokemon. So Terapagos being at effectively like 290 HP, pretty respectable. But I think everybody really opting a lot more into the idea of not only Noctowl, right? Noctowl just being a very good one. If you got a Terra Pokemon on field, it's Shady Dealings all over again on a 100 HP base Pokemon. But instead of the Bouffalon, pairing in Dusknoir with it, Dusknoir and Pidgeot.
Yep.
Dusknoir again, coming in this deck, as we mentioned, and Pidgeot just being such a good card overall. A 101 line, though, so not anything that you can always grab, but is an option that you could be able to find, especially with the Feather Ball. Playing a Feather Ball for literally just that one Pokemon, Feather Ball, being able to find something with free retreat. Pidgeot is the only thing in your deck that has free retreat.
Yeah, it is interesting playing a feather ball over an ultra ball, but I'm sure there
Mm-hmm.
are reasons to not want to have to discard cards. So, fair
Yeah.
enough.
And so
Um,
this deck playing a lot of different other things too, right? You're playing 4 double turbos. I saw a list not too long ago. I can't remember if this was the week prior or was being talked about this weekend. I've seen a Terapagos list do well that only played 3 double turbo energies. I think it was Grant Manley in the show match that he had with Isaiah Bradner in Azul's stream. I think he only played 3 double turbo energies, and I think Grant Manley at one of the recent regionals also played only 3 double turbos. Because theoretically, you only need 3 in the game, right? Because when your first Terapagos gets knocked out, that's 2 prizes.
yeah.
When your next Terapagos gets knocked out, that's 4 prizes. So really, you only need 3 of them. There's thought behind it, and
Yeah.
it's very interesting. But this list specifically that was played in the top 8 of Louisville played 4 double turbos.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do get the logic behind it, and I guess I'm like, man, I don't know what you need that one card space for so much more than another
Hmm.
double turbo, but like, boy howdy, I'm just imagining playing 3 and then prizing your one Colress tenacity and being like, I'm never gonna find these double turbo energy, oh no.
Pidgeot,
Well, imagine you.
Pidgeot EX.
Yeah, it's true. I just am like,
Imagine that you prize 6 cards in one game, man. Couldn't be
imagine,
me in
imagine you
Pokemon.
prize 3 double turbo energy. Because
That's just extremely unlucky.
I will say we have seen 3 of a card prize before. I don't know if I've ever seen 4 of a 4 of, but I have seen
I'm
3.
pretty sure I'm pretty sure fairly recently, and somebody can fact check us in the Discord. I'm pretty sure within the last like year or two, there was somebody on one of the streams that prized 4 of something.
Oh gosh.
Somebody's got to remember it, and somebody's got to let us know. I'm not crazy. I'm pretty sure that's happened fairly recently on the stream.
Uh, but I will say, Jake, to your point earlier about if you're including Duskull, Dusknoir, Blood Moon or Saluna
Hmm.
is a part of that package, and we see it again here in the Terapagos deck. So yeah, Jake, a very astute observation that really it's not a Dusknoir package; it's a Dusknoir Blood Moon package.
Yeah, I think just Blood Moon Ursa Luna, like you were mentioning, that 240 is such a good number, right? And especially with some of these energy acceleration decks, being able to power it up in the middle of the game, it's an extremely efficient attacker and 260 HP as well. I think that's also something to note. 260 HP on Blood Moon Ursa Luna is not an easy number. I feel
No.
like it's definitely difficult at some points for a lot of these decks.
So yeah, I mean, this is interesting as a deck. I think the fact that you have the opportunity to Briar, I think helps significantly because
Hmm.
we saw Caleb doing a really good job, I thought, in both of his matches playing around like Palkia, not overbenching, not allowing Palkia to be able to do 240 damage. And then, Terrapagos is the exact same situation where, like, sure, you can have your own Area Zero underdepths, but for Terrapagos, I guess it doesn't matter with Terrapagos because it's only your bench Pokemon. Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
But still, like if you play an Area Zero under depths,
Yeah,
your opponent who may be playing Galapagos is going to be able to utilize it,
it's
right?
true.
So
Or your opponent who's playing Palkia. It's going to
yeah,
be able
if
to
your opponent's
utilize
playing
it.
Palkia, yeah, they're definitely going to be able to knock you out in one shot. But
Yeah.
definitely a strong archetype. Definitely has a lot of benefits and a lot of values. Very interesting to see. And again, I do like that there's a lot of decks right now that you can play, and a
Hmm.
lot of decks that you can do stuff with. We did see in the day one stream, Sean, there was a fighting type Okie Dokie deck. Did you see that?
Oh, no, I did not. I did not.
It was Okie Dokie versus Cloth. I think it was the round 4 that was streamed on day 1 if you want to go watch in the VOD. I think both players were 3-0 to start. And I think the Okie Dokie deck made day 2 if I
Wow.
remember correctly. I could be wrong about that, but either way, speaking of day 2,
Yeah.
Sean, in this tournament, if you do not know, day 1 you had to have a 6-2 record to make day 2. Now, there were only 8 rounds in the tournament. Usually on day 1 at these tournaments, we see 9 rounds. This time we only saw 8. And lo and behold, Alex Szymanski, this is the first person that I think of, made it into day 2 with a 6-2 record. Barely got into day 2, but you're in day 2, right? So you're still competing in the next day. He went undefeated in day 2 and started this big discussion, I guess you could say, because he was not in contention despite going undefeated in day 2 for the asymmetrical top cut. And it turns out that anybody, if I'm getting this correct, anybody that was X and 2 going into day 2, right? You entered the tournament on day 2 at a 6-2 record. You had no shot whatsoever of making the asymmetrical top cut. So a lot of people angry at well, why was the 9th round cut? A 9th round being there would fix a lot of these problems, right? Why are they even playing at all in day 2 if they're not even going to have a chance at making the asymmetrical top cut and stuff? And I think I even showed you a screenshot of a tweet. And this is a whole different other conversation because this is a much more this is a whole different game and stuff. But 10 Pokemon VGC juniors played in Top Cut this weekend, and 2 of those players in Top Cut got 0 championship points. So this new system, if you do not remember, TPCI introduced a new system of like tournament structure in this new season, and a lot of people showing their distaste to it
Hmm.
uh, in the last tournament, especially with this new X2 doesn't even make the asymmetrical cut, when you qualify for day 2. So why play day 2 anyways type of mentality. So, I mean, there's pros and cons on both sides. I don't really like that you can make day 2 and you have no contention for top cut.
Hmm.
I feel
Feels
like if
weird.
you go undefeated, yeah, if you go undefeated, right, there should be like some benefit. Now, sure, he placed pretty high, right, and he did really well, and
Got a lot
he
of
I mean, he
points.
placed 18th. Yeah, he placed 18th, so he got some money out of it, right? But I don't know, it just feels bad that like he was quite literally pretty much like the best person in the room on day 2,
Hmm.
and he didn't get a chance at like the top crown, right?
Hmm.
Which I feel like is super weird.
It is interesting because it's like, well, for me, either you expand asymmetric top cut, which, to be frank,
Mhm.
asymmetric top cut is already an expansion of top 8. So really, it's the starting at only 8 rounds. That's really where it gets into the nitty gritty of like, that is the problem. But
Mhm.
the only other way around that is, if you're not going to change the day 1 structure, is to almost make day 2 its own unique event that doesn't care about the previous records.
And we used to do that for the World Championships, I believe,
Yeah,
right? You could play like you played day 1 of the World Championships, and then you could play a completely different deck in day 2.
it's
And
true.
it was basically like a reset of the tournament. So
That would be
that's
interesting.
something that's happened before. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't hate that, to be honest, especially when you talk about um, you know, day 1 decks. You don't necessarily have a ton of information of, well, I guess now with stuff like training court and
Yeah, there's a lot of
what's the
platforms with data now.
yeah, I was gonna say there's
Pokestats and
the
training court and
Stats. Yeah, that's the one that I was thinking of. You know, all this information of gathering different archetypes. You know, it's interesting. You could evaluate day 1 and then go into day 2 with a whole different deck and then
yeah.
try to counter it or predict what's going to happen. I don't know. I don't know. It leaves like a salty taste in the mouth. I don't know the exact solution, but
I mean, it could be a situation where you run a max of 8 rounds, but the second you get to 6 wins or 18 match points, you're finished with your day. They stop pairing you at that point.
mm,
Like you could, because like at that, if you're going to run the full 8 rounds though, but the second day doesn't count, then everybody who has 18 points is just going to ID their last rounds and just go home. But you're forcing people to kind of stick around and stay later, and I'm like, I don't like that. So like if you were to go 6-0, say, hey, you get to go home early. It's not
I do
terrible.
believe though, one thing that I did just remember that I think is very important to point out, that I think someone who actually did the math and is much more into the how the tournament happens and stuff like that. I think Alex Szymanski had no way of making the day 2 because a specific set of people were IDing, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's also something to note. Again, you could probably, I'm sure there's going to be people that have much higher levels of knowledge and discussion, like Uncommon Energy, Lake of Rage. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure we'll talk about it. I'm sure Uncommon Energy will have a very good conversation with
Azul.
Chip
Yeah.
and Azul. Yeah, so I'm going to be listening to that.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting because to your point, philosophically, you should not be a player going into day 2 knowing you have absolutely no shot of making top cut, even if you go undefeated in day 2. At that
Hmm.
point, it's just, well, don't allow me to make day 2 then. Pick a lane, right? And I totally understand that. So, um, yeah, it is. It's philosophically very weird. So how
Yeah,
they
it's
solve it,
just it's interesting because I think this is like this is definitely like the first time it's been so public, at least,
yeah,
um, since this new tournament structure was introduced. And to my knowledge, I don't ever remember something like this happening with the old structure that we were doing. It may have
maybe.
happened sometime before. I may not know because I've only been playing for like 5 years or whatever, paying attention to the tournament structure 5, 6 years, but um, not that I can recall, at least in that timeline, something like this has happened.
Well, I also want to just a mild point out is
Hmm.
how I want to keep an eye on this predictions wise, but when we talked about Worlds invites getting much harder this year, which they are, that's fine. Um, there were some thoughts though, of like, will this decrease attendance at regional events, Jake? Still early in the
Hmm.
season, but we do have a few regionals in a few different regions. And I will say in the US, the first 2 regionals of the season have been smaller than the previous, I think, 3 or 4 regionals in the US.
Yeah, only 1938 players in Louisville, so a
Not,
little bit lower, but also it's kind of a weird time, I think, with this format. Been in this format for a little bit. You know, we'll see
yeah,
once like the Surging Spark set comes out if we'll start calling the regionals the biggest NA regional ever,
it's true.
stuff. But
I will
I
also
do
say
think that's also
Kentucky is
a
a
thing. Yeah.
smaller. Yeah, Kentucky is also smaller. When we had the regional, I think in Tennessee last year, it was also much smaller.
Hmm.
So I'm sure that has something to do with it. Baltimore was still quite large at 2,300, but
Yeah, and especially with like October 12th, you know, it's not like a holiday or near or
No.
anything like that. So a lot of people still doing stuff, but either way, it is curious to see, especially the attendance numbers, like you were talking about, you know, some people actually chasing a Worlds invite while some people, you know, but anybody can still qualify for Worlds, remember. All you got to do is just win.
Just got to
You
win a
win the whole
regional.
thing, you qualify. Yeah.
NBD.
Yeah. Easy.
All right.
We'll
Well.
do it soon.
All right, Jake. Sign us out. Sign us out.
That's going to be all for the Metapod podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta and also sometimes talks to each other about different card games, I guess. As I sit here and shuffle my Union Arena deck here. But thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. And let us know in the Discord some of your thoughts and opinions down below, especially in some of the topics that we've talked about today. The official invite is there for you. So thank you.